Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's training. It is 10 o'clock on March 3rd. We thank you so much for the time that you've been willing to share with us today. We know you're very busy, and we want to ensure that we give you as much information in the shortest amount of time as possible and give you time for questions at the end. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining this webinar, Opening or Changing a Virtual School. My name is Matthew Bowser. I'm the Director of Virtual Schools for the Tennessee Department of Education. And with me today is Senior Director Judy Spencer. She's the Senior Director over the Division of Choice, which is within the Department of Districts and Schools, which is led by Dr. Eve Carney. So again, we thank you for joining us today. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and give you the full screen real estate. That way you're looking at the full screen and you can see everything that's on the slide decks. All right, so the Division of Choice, we align ourselves to the Strategic Best for All plan in the Tennessee Department of Education. And the Division of Choice is a very interesting department as it oversees virtual schools, non-public schools, charter schools, home schools. So we really try to offer the state of Tennessee a wide variety of educational opportunities for our students. And if you have more questions about the Division of Choice, feel free to message us or shoot us an email. We also have a website that you can visit. It's jam-packed full of good information for all those different program areas. All right, before we get started, let's go over a couple norms. Please mute your microphones. They should already be muted, but if in case they get unmuted, please mute them. It'll help us more efficiently go through the meeting. Send any questions that you have via chat. We're going to have time at the end of this webinar for questions and answers. So if you could hold those, that would be good. But also stay engaged and contribute your expertise and knowledge when we ask you to interact with exercises. Collectively, we have hundreds of years of educational experience on this webinar with all of you joined in. So we really want to glean from you as much as you learn from us. So share your expertise and your experiences, especially when we have those interactive exercises. So the purpose of this training is to explore the process of starting or changing a virtual school, and also to explain how to complete the form to do that, the Program and Schools Authorization Form. It's not lengthy, but it's a good sized form that we're going to go over in detail today. We're also going to go over how to complete the school directory change request form, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. And we're going to identify resources to aid you in your journey of virtual education. So about me, again, my name is Matthew Bowser. I'm the Director of Virtual Schools. I have come from a district recently. I started here at the Tennessee Department of Education in July. And before that, I served as a teacher and a teacher leader for 7 years, and then as a building level administrator and a district level administrator for 7 years. I served in the roles of supervisor of instruction, IT director, data governance director, director of communications, wore a couple hats. I live in Millington, which is north of Memphis. It's in Shelby County. We're not far from the Mississippi River, so it's kind of nice. We live in Shelby Forest, if you're familiar with the area. So the agenda for today, and I'm not going to go over this in great detail, but we're going to cover several things: virtual education laws and regulations. We're going to talk about virtual education in Tennessee broadly. Also, obviously, how to open a virtual school, how to change a virtual school, the process, how to change and open a virtual school, and also some resources and best practices for you all. So I always like to frame any training that we do for virtual schools or virtual education with how virtual education is defined in Tennessee. I think it's important to understand the delineation between virtual schools and virtual education programs in Tennessee, because recently the State Board of Education has essentially passed a rule that outlines the differences between both, and we'll go over that more in just a moment. But a virtual school in Tennessee is a standalone school, has its own school number, has accountability tied to the school, has a principal, it's its own school completely. Now, a virtual school does obviously operate online, has to have a brick and mortar location as its base, but at the same time, it can operate fully online. So a virtual school in Tennessee is a school that offers a significant portion of its instruction to students via the internet or virtual or remote setting. So what that means is the majority of a student's instruction inside of a virtual school must be remote or virtual. There can be brick and mortar classes that a virtual school student attends for the virtual school, but a majority of the student's instruction must be virtual or remote. And that kind of leads us into virtual education programs. A virtual education program is a program within a brick and mortar school. So it's not a virtual school. It does not have a standalone number. It is a virtual education program is a program that any brick and mortar school in the state can run and offer virtual courses for its students to earn credits or take for course credits or whatever the case may be. So a virtual education program is within a brick and mortar school. Now, interesting about a virtual education program is that many school districts are currently operating one. Many brick and mortar schools are currently operating a virtual education program, and they don't even know it. So if you're offering online courses at your school, you're offering a virtual education program, and you should have a state or a local board policy that outlines different processes of that virtual education program. And you can see those requirements in the state board rule that I'm going to cover next. But it's important to know that there is local board policy that you need to look at for virtual education programs. But virtual education programs are mainly for the remediation and enrichment of students in a brick and mortar school, continuity of educational services for medically fragile students, for homebound instruction. Also, students who are quarantined due to COVID can, leverage a virtual education program if the brick and mortar school offers it. Also, alternative school. Alternative school can be, a different option that brick and mortar schools and LEAs can offer through virtual education programs. So ultimately, virtual school and virtual education programs are very flexible tools that LEAs can leverage to really hone in on student need. I think the state board has done a great job to open it up and to make it very flexible to meet all of the different demands and needs that students and families might have across Tennessee. So I referenced this a moment ago, what laws and rules govern virtual education in Tennessee. And the rule or the law that frames virtual schooling in Tennessee is, you can see it on the screen, Tennessee Code annotated Title 49-16, 201 through 216. And that's known as the Virtual Public Schools Act. It was passed in 2011. And then the State Board of Education has further defined virtual schools in State Board of Education Rule 0520-01-03-.05. So those coupled together frame virtual schooling in Tennessee. Those that Tennessee Code annotated statute and that regulation coupled together, just like on the virtual education program below it, Tennessee Code annotated 49-16-101 through 105 frames virtual education programs, and also the state board rule, the same one that we mentioned earlier, but it's the second section of that. It outlines virtual education programs. So it's very interesting. I recommend, if you're going to start a virtual school or you're wanting to start a virtual education program, that you really read these statutes and rules to really understand and grasp the different requirements, the different ideas, the different things that go into one, filling out the application, and two, really operating a virtual school or virtual education program. So some virtual education quick facts. I think it's always interesting to know where we are currently in the state. So currently Tennessee has 57 virtual schools. Actually, we just approved 2 this week. So there's 59 virtual schools across 43 counties currently. The 2 that we approved won't open until this coming up July, but still, that's progress. Enrollment as of October 1st was 17,264 students, as compared to 4,000 in 2019-2020, which is a 400% increase from 2019 to 2022. So we've been growing. We've been growing by leaps and bounds in the virtual education space. Also, the number of schools increased from 17 to 57 between 2019 and 2021. And like I said before, a majority of school districts and brick and mortar schools across the state, especially the high schools, offer virtual education programs. They may not realize they do, but they do. And something I should have said earlier, if you are operating a virtual education program and you're looking to stand up local board policy, which is part of the regulation, the state board regulation, TSBA, if you work with TSBA, they have a model policy. It's 4.212 that you can look at. It's a good starting place for any kind of local board policy you want for virtual education programs. So we're going to kind of jump into the meat of this webinar. But before we get into the meat, what I would like you to do is I would like you to ponder on this. Why open a virtual school? So I know that many of you are here in this webinar and you either already have a virtual school stood up and you're wanting to get more information on maybe changing it, or possibly you're thinking about opening a virtual school. So I would like you to take about 2 minutes, and in the chat, I would like you to tell me what you think virtual schools can provide to your students and families and why you're interested in virtual schools in general. So take about 2 minutes, and in the chat, go ahead and type what virtual schools can provide your students and families. Yeah, flexibility, that's a big key of virtual education. Yeah, differentiation, I see that as well, Courtney. So something that I like about virtual schools and virtual education is that students can work at their own pace. I think that's really a powerful tool for school districts. Expanded access, providing different options for learning for students, the learning modality. I agree. Oh yeah, safe environment. Yeah, especially right now, a lot of families obviously are worried about COVID. So with that safe environment, some families are opting for virtual education for that. Yeah, different learning styles. I like that. Some people, some students really excel in the virtual setting. I know when my son was in the virtual setting, he could get all his work done, and he'd have time to spare. And I think he really enjoyed it because he could work, at his own pace, and he could reread things, and he could go and find different resources that the teachers linked for ancillary materials. Those were some great responses. Thank you. As I sat the other night and I was creating this webinar, I really pondered on what virtual schools can provide, and I think that y'all essentially hit all of these. Flexible educational offerings for students and families. I think that's very important for LEAs, especially now. I won't get too far into this, but COVID has kind of changed the educational landscape, and we really have to ensure that we meet the needs. The needs are sometimes very, very different across families. We have to make sure we meet the needs of our families. A safe environment for students. Yeah, y'all said that as well. Absolutely. Opportunity for students to complete courses at their own pace. I think that's a very a very powerful tool for virtual education and virtual schools in general, that students can work at their own pace. I mean, that's in the regulation, that students can work at their own pace and move to the subsequent course once they finish it. So if you have a student who knocks out a whole course in 9 or 12 weeks, they can move on to the next course, and that's permissible. And then also, obviously the opportunity for LEAs to offer a broader range of courses, that's very powerful as well. So let's jump into some of the more technical aspects of opening a virtual school. One of those aspects is the timeline. So currently the application to open the window to submit an application to open a virtual school is open. So that window is currently open, and it closes on June 1st each year. So that's each year, June 1st is when it closes. That's the deadline. So you can start submitting your applications now to change grade configurations if you have a virtual school, or to open a virtual school if you'd like. And then the standard turnaround time to review those applications and get back to you with initial response is 10 days. We try to make it shorter than that, but we give us that 10-day buffer window because sometimes we get an influx of applications and we have to review each one in detail. So 10 days is our standard operating turn time. So a high-level overview of opening a new virtual school is this. And you can see it on the screen, but I'll go through each part of it. The LEA or the board will approve a new virtual school. So what I mean by that is the your board of education has to approve opening a virtual school before you can submit the program and schools authorization form. So they have to go through their board process to approve opening it. Once they do that, then you complete the program and schools authorization form, and you complete all of the pieces, even Addendum C, and then you submit it through the school directory change request form. And I'm going to go through those in depth in just a moment, but that's the process. So once you complete the program and schools authorization form and you submit it, we at the TDOE will review it, and we will get back to you if we need any clarification on any of the pieces of the form, or if possibly something was, inaccurately keyed or typed. We'll get back to you on that as well. So we'll email you and say, hey, we need this or that, and then you'll just respond and send it back to us, and we'll review it. And then once we get a completed form and we've reviewed it and everything is the way it should be, then we will authorize a new virtual school by assigning it a school number. And then the school directory team will actually reach out to you with that school number through email. They'll reach out to the school directory contact and also the person who submitted the form with that new school number, and essentially an email saying that the school has been approved and the start date of the school. And the schools are activated in the school directory on July 1st. So that's when they're activated. So like I said, we're going to go through in detail how to complete the program and schools authorization form. So where we are now is you have gotten board approval, and now you're working on the form itself. So to find the program and schools authorization form, you go to the school directory website, and I'm going to provide this slide deck to you all through email after this training, and also we'll post it to our website so you can get it. You'll have the recording and the slide deck. So if you're trying to feverishly copy down that link or something or take a screenshot, you don't have to. We're going to give you the slide deck, so you can just click on the link. But it's found on the program and schools authorization form is found on the school directory website, and it's found right there where the arrow is. And this is what the program and schools authorization form looks like. And I'm not going to read obviously all that, but I wanted to show you what the form itself looked like and the different areas that you'll need to complete to open a virtual school. So if you look at the bottom, the request checklist, you'll see the district information, assurances, request type, and Addendum C. Those are all sections that you have to complete to submit the program and schools authorization form to open a virtual school. So we're going to go over each one of these different sections that are highlighted. We're going to go over those in detail now. So district information. This is kind of straightforward, but you'd be surprised how many times I have to send back an email saying, hey, can you please put this in this field? So district name obviously is the district name. Date is the date you're filling out the application. The director of schools name is your superintendent's name. School district number, that is the number of your school district. So each school district has a state ID or state number. That is the number for your school district. And if you don't know it, I'm sure that your SIS coordinator or SIS director will know that, or your school directory contact would know that as well.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat about, do you have to complete all those sections again if you're adding grade levels? Just give us an intro. We will get to that later. Go ahead and address that if you would.
Okay. Yes. So to add grade levels, you have to complete different sections. So we will get to that in just a bit, but you do have to complete different sections, and this is one of the sections you do have to complete to change a grade level. Yes. So the district number, we just covered that. The school district phone number is the phone number for the school district. District fax, same thing. Mailing address, same thing. It's the main mailing address for the school district, city and zip code. That's part of the mailing address. Now, person completing form if different from above. Obviously, superintendents usually don't complete this form. It's usually the school directory contact. So the person completing the form will complete that area and put their name there, the phone number for that person, and also the email address for the person completing the form. So the assurances, we see this not signed very often because I think they just miss it because it's right below the district information. But this is a section that the superintendent signs. The superintendent or the director of schools has to sign this piece. The school directory contact can't sign it for them. Essentially what this is it's validating and verifying the superintendent knows that they're accountable for all of these things in this form, to ensure that they're accurate, to ensure that the school district is going to comply to all the assurances and all the different rules and regulations and statutes that go behind these assurances. So the superintendent would need to sign this with their own signature. So request type is the next section that you would need to fill out. And request type for opening a virtual school is new school or program number. So you would check section A, and then you would go and you would fill out section A. Now, to your point a moment ago, whoever asked the question, I can't see it, who asked it in the chat, but when you change, and we'll get to this later, but when you change a school or program type, change a school or grade configuration, you'll select section C. You'll just check section C rather than the new school. And then you would finish and you would complete section C rather than section A. But this section, we're just talking about opening a virtual school, so you just do section A in this. So here is a screenshot of section A and what section A on the program and schools authorization form would look like, or currently looks like. And again, always download the form from the website. Even if you downloaded it like a month ago, go ahead and every time you need to fill it out, download a new copy, because it could have been updated by the school directory team since the last time that you downloaded it. So always download a new copy. So this again is section A, and this we also see several pieces that aren't filled in correctly on this form. So I'm going to go through it kind of at a high level. The request, obviously, you're going to choose school. Is this request related to a school program? If you're opening a new virtual school, you choose school. School or program type, you'll actually want to choose virtual school right here in this section. And then new school or program name, you need to put what name that you propose for the virtual school. Even if you're not solid on it yet, you got to put a name. You can't be a to be determined field there. Date opening is the first day of classes. So usually people use their attendance start date for that. Don't just say July 1st, because when we put it into our system, we're going to think that kids are going to start enrolling on July 1st. So put the date that you're first offering classes. Principal or program director's name. So if the school has 9 or more teachers, the school has to have a supervising principal, a full-time supervising principal. So you need to put that school principal's name here. And even if the school doesn't have 9 or more teachers, the school has to have some kind of principal. So you have to have a principal's name here. That can change. If you submit the application with a principal's name and then something happens, before the start date of the school and you change principals, that's fine. You can submit a change request. That's not a big deal, but we have to have somebody's name here initially. And then the lowest grade level and the highest grade level. So the lowest grade level that you can serve in virtual schools is kindergarten, and the highest grade level is obviously 12th grade. So anywhere from K to 12, low K, high 12, any variation of that. You can do a 3 to 5 or a 6 to 8, whatever the case may be for your school district. School or program phone number. If you don't have a dedicated space, you can put the district number here, but at the same time, you're required to have a dedicated physical office for the virtual school. But I know that when you're applying, sometimes it's hard to have a dedicated phone number because you don't have the school approved yet. So if you can provide a dedicated phone number, if not, you need to provide the district phone number here. School or program fax, that's pretty straightforward. School email address, again, it is best to have a school email address rather than to put a person's email address here, because the school email address can persist, whereas that person may or may not work for the district, for a long time. So it's best to have a school email address right here. Web address, obviously, that is sometimes forthcoming when you apply for virtual school, but it's good to already have one stood up. It really helps parents and helps us review the virtual school, and it helps the parents really find information about the virtual school. So having a web address is really important, but sometimes I know during the application process, you don't already have one. So put the district's web address there if you don't have a virtual school address. But once you get a virtual school address, you need to submit a change request for that. School or program address, city, state, and zip. Again, your school districts are required to have a brick and mortar location for their virtual schools. Now, that doesn't mean they have to have students coming in there, but they have to have some address in a brick and mortar location for their virtual school. So you need to provide that address in that section. Now, this next piece is not necessarily for virtual schools, but you still need to fill it out. Is this school or program replacing an existing one? If you're opening a new one, if it is replacing one, you choose yes, but if it's not, you choose no. If it is replacing one, you'll choose yes on the implementation of the school improvement plan, because every single school in the state has to do a yearly school improvement plan. So just go ahead and choose yes to this. If you choose no, then you can leave this blank, but you're still going to have to do a school improvement plan regardless if you check this or not. Again, not really for virtual school, but you can leave this blank if yes, there's no piece of information you need to put in the federal designation section. For pre-K, is this request for a pre-K site? In this section, you would leave this blank as well, that we don't offer pre-K in virtual school. And then over here on this side, the school or program implementation phase, just choose other. That's all you need to choose on that. Regardless of the situation, just choose other. Nearest elementary school for pre-K, you can leave that blank. Full-time supervising principal in this section, full-time teaching principal or full-time program director. You'll need to select the one that's applicable. Again, if you have 9 or more teachers, you'll need a full-time supervising principal. Less than 9 teachers, then you can do a full-time teaching principal, but you're still required to have a principal. Number of teachers, a lot of people put FTEs in this section. You can put that if you'd like, or you can put that you have how many full-time teachers you have and how many part-time teachers you have. You don't have to necessarily go by FTEs. And then length of teacher day, we've seen it range from 7.5 hours to 8 hours. I think it's based on your local board policy. So you'll put what your board requires your teachers to work in this area here. So this is actually section A continued. This is a continuation from the last form we were looking at. And this is a very important section, and this is where we get the majority of the back and forth emails asking for school districts to change things. So the estimated student enrollment. There are actually 3 data points that you need to put in this box. You need to put the total estimated enrollment. We're not going to hold you to this. This is not necessarily a cap. Now there's a statutory cap and a regulatory cap in state rule, but this is not a cap. This is just the total students that you estimate will enroll. This is the total estimate of in-district students, and this is the total estimate of out-of-district students. Now, if you're not going to offer out-of-district enrollment, then you can put a 0 for out-of-district. And obviously you're going to offer in-district enrollment, so just put whatever number you estimate for in-district. If you are going to offer out-of-district enrollment here, then we will essentially classify you as a statewide virtual school, which means that when parents call us and ask, hey, what virtual opportunities do we have? We're going to look to see what school districts put their accepting out-of-district enrollment, and we're going to say, oh, we have this school or that school. So if you put out-of-district enrollment there, when parents call, we're going to, give them a list of all the schools that offer out-of-district enrollment. Length of student day, this has to be at least 6.5 hours. So 6 hours and 30 minutes at the minimum. We've seen some school districts do 7 hours, but that's again based on local board policy, but it statutorily has to be 6.5 hours at the minimum. Are students assigned on a permanent basis per school year? What this section means is are students allowed to transfer out of the school? So if you're allowing students to transfer out mid-year, you'll choose no on this. If you choose yes, then they can't transfer out. Again, that's your board's decision. You just got to tell us what you're going to do. And then what test will be administered? This is another section that we oftentimes have to ask for clarity. We want you to actually list all these state assessments and benchmarks that are going to be administered. Don't just put the term all state tests here or all state required assessments. Actually list the assessments that you're going to administer. That way we can verify it against the grades that you're going to serve. Now, do students receive official Tennessee high school diplomas and mastery certificates? So if you serve 12th grade, then you need to check yes. If you don't serve 12th grade, you can check no. Congressional district, there's actually a form on our virtual schools website that is it's a guide on how to fill this whole form out, and a very in-depth guide. And it has a link to where you can find your congressional district number. So on our virtual schools website, I think it's called Guidance on Opening or Changing a Virtual School. It's actually a document. That's where this presentation kind of comes from. And you'll see on that document, there's a link to the congressional district. Enrollment and Attendance Software Package, that's your SIS. So put the name of your SIS here. And then additional comments or just whatever you'd like to put. You can also use this space to fill out the rest of the assessments from what test will be administered. That filled up a couple fields above it, because I know that's a lot to type in that one little area. So Addendum C, kind of getting into the meat of the program and schools application. These are the 9 different topics that you'll need to expound on within the application. And I'm not going to go over them on this screen right here. I'm going to go over them individually, but this is what that section looks like. So again, the guidance documents on our website will walk you through how to fill this form out. It's that quick reference guide. That second link here is the very outlined guide on how to fill this form out. And then also there is a FAQ on our website that goes over frequently asked questions for opening a virtual school. So when you compile your evidence, and when you're compiling Addendum C, those 9 different topics that you have to provide evidence for, we recommend naming the files as such. And this is going to be on each slide, but I'm not going to go over it for each slide. But it's for this specific file, you put school name - excerpt of board minutes - date. So when you're making the file to send to us, that way we can easily identify that file and see where your evidence is, and it really speeds up the application process so we can get it back to you in a timely fashion. So when possible, save the file in PDF. That applies to all submitted files. Sometimes when you send it in Word, the formatting is a little bit crazy and it's hard to read. So in this specific piece of evidence, you need to provide the board minutes with the votes, the yays and nays of the board. And you can usually get that from your district website. They usually have the minutes posted, and you can just download that PDF and you can screenshot it if you want to, that one specific item on the agenda. You can screenshot that, or you can save the whole agenda as PDF and just refer to it, and with a narrative saying it's line item 15 on the agenda. But yeah, we do need the board minutes approval with the votes up and down.
And Matt, I'd like to jump in here real quickly. The board minutes need to be really clear that the board is approving the opening of a new virtual school and authorizing district representatives to submit the application. I think we've gotten several submissions in the past where the board discussed a virtual school, or, it wasn't very clear that the board actually approved the opening of a virtual school for the district. So it needs to be really clear on that point. And I can't emphasize that enough.
Yep. Thank you, Judy. The next piece of evidence that you'll provide is you'll need to provide access to the proof that the virtual school is going to provide access to instructional materials and technologies. Again, this is a regulation, the state board regulation that's statutorily required. So you'll need to provide a document describing how you're going to provide access to instructional materials for virtual school students and access to devices and connectivity. You should also describe how you're going to support those devices and how you're going to support families and students in learning how to use those devices and how to repair those devices if they were to break. So it's essentially a process. You'll explain the process of that and also how you're going to provide those resources to virtual students. It's very important piece. The next piece of evidence that you'll provide is proposed sequential curriculum. Now, this is something that you need to focus on and you really need to reflect on when you submit it. Essentially, we need a document that outlines the courses you're going to offer and what curriculum you're going to use for those courses. And those courses and that curriculum needs to be on the state-approved textbooks and instructional materials list. So you really need to, again, look at this list of textbooks and instructional materials for each course, for each subject level, and see if the instructional materials and textbooks are on that state approved list. Can't stress that enough. This is a major point of the application where we have to send it back to school districts very often and say, hey, the curriculum that you're proposing isn't on the state approved list. Now you can use, as the primary curriculum, it has to be on the state approved list. You can use as supplemental curriculum, you can use something, a teacher might find or make at this point, but the primary curriculum has to be on the state approved list. But they can use supplemental material that is not on the state approved list. But again, I'm stressing the primary curriculum has to be on the state approved list. So a schedule or calendar needs to be provided of the instructional time for students, and that instructional time has to show that there's 180 days of instruction with 6.5 hours of instruction per day. And most times it's sufficient for school districts to provide the instructional calendar that outlines that from EIS. There is an instructional calendar in EIS that outlines how many minutes a day of instruction students get for the school and how many days of instruction they get. And that is good. If you can get that from your SIS person, that would absolutely satisfy this. And then also we need to see the daily schedules, like a example of a daily schedule for students, what it would look like. Even if it's asynchronous, provide an example of a daily schedule that you propose for students, because even asynchronous students need to have some kind of scheduled time. They may change it or it may look very flexible, but they need that help to identify what a schedule for asynchronous student looks like. Students really need that. So you also have to provide evidence on how the school is going to monitor attendance. And this is something that I think that most schools have a handle on what attendance is required, but they haven't really translated that into what it looks like in a virtual setting. So what we're really looking for here is not just board policy. We're looking for how that board policy is going to be applied in the virtual setting. State board rule outlines 5 different ways that a school can take attendance for their students. So if you go and you look at the state board rule and you choose from those, you can choose 2 of those ways. And we're looking for you to do that. Choose 2 of the ways to take attendance, daily attendance, and expound on how you would do that in the virtual setting. And also, we'd like to know about your truancy intervention for virtual students. The truancy intervention for virtual students is going to look different than the brick and mortar students. So we want you to call that out and explain that in detail, what the truancy intervention will look like in the virtual setting. Enrollment for virtual schools, what we need from you here is we need a document that will essentially ensure that the class sizes aren't going to exceed the class size maximum, and also that the whether or not the school is allowing enrollment for students outside the zone of residency, which means out of district students essentially, and if so, what that process looks like. We also need to know any kind of procedures or outline for withdrawing during the school year, or any kind of procedures that you have are going to ensure that students can remain enrolled. The students within your district who enroll in the virtual school, you can set a procedure up to where if they're not meeting academic progress by a certain date, you can transfer them back, or you can transfer them back to their home brick and mortar school. But we need to see that procedure so we can review it. So that's part of this as well. SPED and ELL students, we need to know how you're going to provide services for the special population students, how you're going to provide all of the English language and student with disability, English language learner and student with disability services that you would provide in a brick and mortar school. We also need to know how you're going to identify students who may have a language barrier or student with disability. And I know a lot of school districts will cite their home language surveys during registration, and that's good. That's a good piece, and they'll cite that they ask the student and family to provide any IEP or 504 that the student may have upon enrollment, and that's good as well. But then the students who have not been identified with a disability, or the students who didn't fill out the language home language survey, how is the virtual school going to identify those students? Some school districts, talk about their RTI model, or they may talk about, different programs they have going that identifies students that are at a learning deficit. Those are things we're looking for. So if you can explain to us how you're going to really identify those students with disabilities and English language learners in the virtual setting, that's what we need here. Teachers and staff, what we're looking for in this document is we're looking for what professional development the school is going to offer the virtual school teachers, and also how the teachers are assigned to students, the teacher of record, how the teacher of record is assigned to students, and proof that the teachers that are employed by the LEA are going to be evaluated annually. So that's very important. And I know many people cite, well, they'll be observed with Team or Tiger, and that's fine. You can say that. But we're also looking for how the virtual teacher, like in the procedure in a virtual setting, that teacher is going to be evaluated. So any details around that would be very helpful for us. And then administering assessments. This is the last piece of the 9 pieces of evidence. And we're looking for in this section how you're going to administer assessments that align with the requirements for those assessments. And what I mean is this: for example, EOC and TCAP testing is required to take in person in a proctored environment, right? Now, it may be on a computer, it may be paper-based, whatever the grade may be, but it has to be in a proctored environment. How is the school going to ensure that its students are able to take any applicable tests, state tests, in the correct environment? So if you're a school that's going to offer district or statewide enrollment, how are you going to ensure that students from across the state are going to be able to test in the right environment? That's what we're looking for here. And then additional assurances. This is not part of the 9 pieces of evidence, but this is also a part of Addendum C. And it's assurances that deal with virtual education and virtual schools primarily. The first section of assurances was just a general assurances. So the superintendent will need to read this, but by signing that first assurance piece on page 2, he or she, the superintendent director of schools, is agreeing to these assurances as well. So submitting the program and schools authorization form to open a virtual school, we've already gone through how to fill it out. To submit it, what you do is you submit it via the school directory change request form. And that change request form is at this link here. And the school directory team is working on getting this link put on their website. So if you remember earlier that screenshot of the arrow pointing to the program and schools authorization form, they're working to put a link to the school directory change request form underneath it. So it'll all be in one page. But this is the link to that school directory change request form if you need it. And then what you'll do is you'll complete the program and schools authorization form with all the applicable sections. And then you'll take that and you'll take all of the 9 pieces of evidence and you can zip them together in a zip file. And you can upload them to the school directory change request form. If you're having problems with the zip file, you can take them and combine them all in one long PDF document. If you know how to do that, that's fine too, as long as there's clear delineation between the 9 different pieces of evidence that we need. That's fine as well. And then you'll upload that one file to the school directory change request form. And again, if you need help with zipping files for Windows or Mac, here's a couple links that'll help you do that. So completing the school directory change request form, this is a pretty short form, so it's pretty straightforward. This is the change request form that you'll use for opening a virtual school, but it's also the form that you'll use for any kind of changes that you make. And we'll go over that in just a moment. So I'm not going to belabor this, but you just put your name, email address, phone number. It is for a public school, so you choose that, and then you choose your district name. And then each one of these sections has conditional logic built in. So if you check yes, it's going to expand more boxes. So you see here on the add new program or school piece, I chose yes, and it opened these additional boxes. If I would have chose yes up here, it would have opened additional boxes. So I'm going to choose yes on the add new program or school, because again, this is a webinar about opening a virtual school. So I choose yes. Here's where I choose to upload the file, either the zip file containing all of the documents or one PDF that contains all the documents. And then this is for a school. So choose school here. All right. And again, it has different sections that you're going to choose no on for opening of school. Here, you'll just choose no on everything. And here are the assurances. It's the same verbiage not the same verbiage, it's the same idea that was in the program schools authorization form. The superintendent needs to key their name here. And then click submit form. And then once you do that, it will go to the school directory department, and they will send me information to review. That information they send me will be the program schools authorization form and all of the documents and evidence that you submitted. And that's what kicks off the review process. So changing a virtual school. Changing a virtual school is a lot of the same processes. So this part will not take very long, but it's very important that you know the differences. So the LEA completes the program schools authorization form, just like we talked about earlier. Now, there are some instances where you don't have to complete that form, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But the school completes the program schools authorization form and then submits it, the LEA completes it and submits it to this school directory team via the school directory change request form. We review it, and then once we review it, we contact you and notify you the changes have been authorized. And changes, like I said, we're going to go over those in detail here. Changes that don't require Tennessee Department of Education approval, and you actually don't have to fill out that program and schools authorization form, are district school leader name, school email address, school website, school physical address, school phone number or fax number. You can just submit the school directory change request form without the program and schools authorization form for those. And it'll just kick off the change, and we'll approve it, and then you'll get an email saying it's approved. There's not much to review on these. Areas that do require TDOE approval. Now, school name change, grade configuration change, add or removing grades. And I want to note that you can only add or remove up to 3 grades per school year. Kindergarten doesn't count as one of those grades, but 1st through 12th it does. So only up to 3 grades per school year. If you need more than 3, that's a different situation, and we'll have to just contact us and we can walk you through that process. But it has process to do like closing a school and opening a school. It's not ideal. So another piece, another change that would require TDO approval is school openings and closings. And then what you would do is you would complete the program and schools authorization form for all these. Every one of these changes require the program and schools authorization form. Then you would go through the process of submitting it through the school directory change request form, and then it would go through review process, and then you would get an email from us saying, hey, we need more information, or you'll get an email from school directory saying, hey, it's been approved. So the overview of the types of changes, I thought this would be valuable for you because we've covered a lot of information in a really short amount of time. So I thought this table would be very informative for you, and it kind of outlines the different types of changes that you may need. What if the change needs Tennessee Department of Education authorization, what forms you need to fill out for it, and the submission deadlines. So it's kind of an overcap of what we've talked about. And I think this will be valuable for you once you get the slide deck to maybe just, have this a screenshot or something of this. That way you can just refer back to it. Some resources that we've talked about are the Tennessee Code Annotated and also the different state board rules. And here's links to what we use at the department for both the policies, rules, and for the Tennessee Code Annotated statutes. So those are good resources to go look up those the statutes and rules I referred to earlier. Also, the Tennessee Virtual School website, that's a very good resource. We have trainings on there. We have FAQs on that site, and the slide deck will be posted to the site as well. Here is the textbooks and instructional materials list. It's very important as you fill out the program and schools authorization form that you make sure your textbooks and instructional materials are on it. And here's a webinar the school directory team has put together for a more in-depth dive on school directory of the program schools authorization form. It's very good. And then again, my name is Matt Bowser. Here's my email address, and here is the virtual school email address. They both come to me. This also goes to other people within our team in case I'm not available. So you can email one or both of those, and we can get back to you. So we're at the juncture now, and we have about 4 minutes left where we can answer any questions that you might have. So if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer it. I see someone's typing a question. A couple of people are, so we'll give them a second to finish the question. Well, those of you who don't have a question, just if you would like to, we really need this actually, and we'll wait for you to finish your questions and we can answer them. But we would like for you to take the survey, and this survey will help us better serve you in the future. If you can give us some feedback on what you liked or disliked or what you need in the future, that'd be helpful for us as well. So if you could take this survey. All right, we have a couple questions. Pending proof textbook version. I need to submit again. Robin, let me answer that question offline with you, because I think it's a more nuanced question that we can answer on a webinar. If we wanted to add a 9 through 12 to our virtual school that does not meet your requirements, will we have to close and reopen our virtual school? Yes, because it's more than 3 grade levels. I think I'm understanding your question. The question is, if we wanted to add a 9 through 12 to our virtual school, then that does not meet your requirements. Would we have to close and reopen our virtual school? So it's more than 3 grade levels. So in that regard, yes. But if I'm not understanding correctly, feel free to clarify and I'll answer it again.
Yeah, and let me add here, this is driven by federal guidelines. So we don't have any control over this. We are just limited to those 3 grade changes per year. So if you want to do more than 3, it would require the closure of your existing school. And by closure, I mean, and reopening, it means we're going to have to assign you a new school number as if you're starting anew. And that's what's required if you want to do a grade change that exceeds 3 grade spans.
So Therese, yes, if you wanted to do 9 through 11, you could do that.
Yes.
And then the next year you could do the 12th grade. Yes, you have to have any kind of grade change approved by the Tennessee Department of Education. And yeah, so you would have to have that approved by. So you need to fill out the program and schools authorization form, and also, go through that process of submitting it through the school directory change request form. All right, I don't see anyone else typing any questions. If you have more questions, feel free to email us. Again, I'm going to go back to the email. I'll get back to it. matt.bowser@tn.gov or virtual.schools@tn.gov. Feel free to email us and we'll try to get you an answer as quickly as possible. So again, thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a wonderful Thursday.
Oh, hang on.
Oh, there's that question. If we want to drop K3 from our school, we could do that with approval. Yes, so from what the federal requirements say, I'm not going to get too in depth with this, but yes, kindergarten doesn't count as one of the 3 grades. So 1st through 3rd, yes, and then kindergarten, yes, technically, yes. Yeah. All right. Well, anybody else have a question? And feel free to, you're very welcome. Feel free to email us and we'll try to get you an answer as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.